Hi, everybody. I hope you are all doing well. I hope your week is going well so far. I just wanted to spend a few minutes and talk about some of the things that you noted in your very good quizzes on books 2 and 4 from Paradise Lost. These were the readings that you were doing for last Thursday. So I just want to point out a couple good details that you all noticed and then set you up for book 9, which you'll be reading for I think it's Thursday, April 23rd. So let's start with book 2. So if you remember, book 2, the very beginning of this book, we had all of the fallen angels meeting in Pandemonium, this big kind of palace that they built to meet and discuss political issues. Does that remind you of anything like, I don't know, a parliament building or a congressional building? Interesting. In any case, they meet in Pandemonium to have this great consult. They are going to discuss, oh, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? We've been cast down into hell. What's next? And if you remember, your first quiz question from quiz 5 was to kind of outline the 4 different proposals that 4 different fallen angels came up with. And I want to share with you some good answers from that quiz 5. So if your name gets mentioned and your answer is discussed, you earn some extra credit. So nice work with that. Okay, let me kind of move out of the way here. So the very first fallen angel who proposes one possible course of action is Moloch. And Moloch, as Hagen wrote in his quiz, Moloch is not happy. He speaks first, and his proposal is to have open war against tyranny. So he's like, that's it, y'all. Let's try it again. We almost defeated God the first time. We can do it the second time. He believes this will work because they will have the weapons of war, and nothing could be worse than hell. They don't have anything to lose. So let's go ahead and try and have war. Another war with God. So Moloch's like, look, guys, we're in hell. We're on burning fires and burning lakes of fire. It can't get worse. Let's try again, right? So good answer with that, Hagen. Now, the next fallen angel who speaks, he comes up with a slightly different plan. So this comes from Trent. Very nice job, Trent. Belial is the second angel to speak. And he proposes that, hey, let's sit and not take any actions towards God's army. He decides this because he thinks that God's anger against them will eventually cease. So Belial is like, hey, y'all, let's just let God calm down. Let's hang out here in heaven. Or sorry, wrong place. Let's hang out here in hell, and maybe things will get better. Maybe God will forgive us, a couple thousand years. Maybe he will even let us out of hell. So Belial is the pacifist. He said, let's wait and just see if God's anger subsides. Now, the next angel to speak. This comes from Joey. Joey says that the third angel, Memnon, argues that there's no place for Satan and his angels in heaven unless they overthrow God because they don't want to serve God or live like him. They should be dismissing quite all thoughts of war, says Memnon, in order to become used to their new home in hell and learn to use its negatives, such as pain and darkness, as advantages. Mammon also asks, cannot we, his light, imitate when we please? Suggesting that they can learn to be as magnificent as God. So Joey's really good answer here is showing how Mammon is saying, you know what? Why do we want to get back up into heaven anyway? Let's stay down here in hell. We'll put up some curtains, maybe a poster or two. It'll feel like home. And let's just rule over this space. And the reason why he wants to stay in hell and make it work for them. He doesn't want to fight against God because he says, oh, wait a minute, guys, it can get worse. You know how it can get worse? God can take away our ability to think, to understand, to reason, at least, even if we're down in hell and it's really hot and uncomfortable and we're not having a good time, we can still think. We can still have rational thoughts. The ability to use your mind is still there, says Memnon. So he's like, you know what? It can get worse because God can just cease our existence. He can prevent us from at least being able to use our brains and to imagine things and to have rational thoughts. So that's an interesting way for Mammon to say, oh, it can get worse. We cannot exist. So good job with that one, Joey. And then the last angel who speaks, and this comes from Jordan's answer, Beelzebub. And Beelzebub, his proposal is to give up on the idea of attacking heaven, but Beelzebub has an alternative plan. Let's invade the world of man, this new creature. I've heard rumors that these things called humans on this place called Earth, something God created. Let's go and try and invade that world. And Beelzebub believes that they should try to turn man against God because God loves man more than the angels, and that making God destroy his own creation would be the best revenge. So Beelzebub is all about revenge. Let's go after God where it's really going to hurt him. Let's attack those humans in this new place called Earth. And of course, the angels are like, yeah, great idea. Let's do that. And Satan volunteers to take on the task to be the one to sneak out of hell, go find this place called Earth, descend into Eden, and trick Adam and Eve, which is, of course, what we'll be reading about in book 9. So good job with that one, Jordan. Okay, so now let's go to the next question. Oh, let me just say, if you remember, the next question on the quiz was asking about book 4, the very first time that we see Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and what details about their appearance, what details are significant, what do you notice? So I just wanted to point out a couple answers from this question for y'all. So Lauren has a good one. Lauren, she's looking a little bit later in book 4, and she found a really interesting moment. She said the one line that truly represents what Adam and Eve were before the betrayal, before Eve and Adam ate the apple, was, quote, they were as liberal, as free, as infinite. Let me see if I can find this whole quote, and I'll read it for you. Here Adam is talking to Eve, and he says that they were made as liberal and free as infinite, that raised us from the dust and placed us here in all this happiness, who at his hand have nothing merited, nor can perform aught whereof he hath need. So what that line is saying that Lauren explains here, it's significant because it shows the supposed freedom, but not being independent. And it raises the question of what freedom is if you do not think for yourself. Is it really freedom? Because in these lines, Adam is kind of saying, yeah, we're free, we can do whatever we want, but we're also dependent on God, and we do whatever he tells us to. So it's this weird contradiction. And Lauren made the nice connection of relating that to the Stuart era in 1600s in England, and the kings of the time being the supreme ruler. Charles I, he was perceived as controlling and absolutist king. He was executed. So there are some connections there to the actual political world of early modern England. So I think Lauren brings up a really good point. In some ways, Adam and Eve, they have to be free to make the choice to rebel against God by eating the apple. But at the same time, in Eden, they're completely dependent on God. He gave them everything. He gave them directions about what they need to be doing every day, their kind of workload, so to speak. So there is kind of this weird negotiation between free will and predetermination. Your path's already set for you, or do you have a choice? And those are still questions that we struggle with today, right? So interesting questions that you raised there, Lauren, in your answer. Another good answer, good detail, comes from Marlene. She says that Adam and Eve are described as being disheveled, not put together, but it didn't matter because they were God's creations, and all of his creations are beautiful no matter what. She looks at the line that describes Eve's hair, and that says her unadorned golden tresses were disheveled, but in wanton ringlets waved as the vine curls her tendrils. And then Marlene notes that Adam's hair was also described as having a hyacinth hue, and she connected that to the idea of hyacinth, the plant, of a blooming plant. And she realized by looking at the footnotes that Adam's hair was curled like the petals of a flower. And she looks at that quote that says, his fair large front and eyes sublime declared absolute rule, and hyacinth locks. So we are getting some clues about their personalities, their roles, based on their hair. So Marlene started this thought for us, and Camilla picks it up a little bit more. Camilla said, Okay, she's looking at Adam and Eve's hair. They have curly hair. She says in line 301, she looks at that quote of Adam's hair like hyacinth locks. Hyacinth look like tight coils and curls, which is like the hair of black people, which is really interesting detail. Eve's hair is curly as well and is called wild in lines 307 and 308, which again describe a beautiful black woman's hair. It's wild, curly, and grows how it wants to. It's still beautiful nonetheless. And I think Marlene and Camila are picking up on a really interesting point about Eve's hair. It's wild. It's hard to brush. It's like she just got up in the morning and her hair is all wild and crazy. Why is that important? Why does that detail matter? Well, I think we'll see it really starts to matter in book 9 when Eve is the one who first bites the apple. She's the one who first makes a decision to disobey God. So in a way, she is a kind of wild, almost uncontrollable person. And that is reflected in the way that her hair can't be tamed, that it's curly, that it's wild, but yet also, as Camila notes, beautiful. So there's some interesting complexities in thinking about how the physical description relates to something deeper about these characters or biblical figures as Milton is representing them. So that's where we lead into book 9 that you're reading for April 23rd. So in book 9, this is when everything goes bad for Adam and Eve, right? So Eve is deceived into eating the apple. I'm going to have you thinking about how exactly Satan, who is described as a serpent by this point, how exactly is he able to deceive her? She knows she's not supposed to eat it. So how does he get her to do what she knows she's not supposed to do? And then also think about how is it that Eve gets Adam to bite the apple after she does. Adam knows that there are going to be some really bad consequences. Why does he do it? And then think about what changes for them. One important detail to note is that they start suddenly to feel very different kinds of emotions they have never felt before. So that's something that I want you to think about as you read through book 9. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. As always, if you have questions about the text, send me an email. I hope y'all are doing well and more soon. Bye, guys.